History 1. I was home alone one evening back in 2010. My folks were out on their regular date night, the kind where they have one too many drinks at dinner and pass out in the theater kind of dates. Anyway, I just got back from my evening jog. It was a hot July day and I had worked up quite a sweat, so I decided to take a cold shower to cool off. Our house didn't have air conditioning and it was pretty stuffy, so I opened a few windows to get some airflow. I remember opening a window in the kitchen, 2 windows opposite each other in the living room, and one in the basement. I knew I'd be spending my night down there watching movies since it was cooler. I took my shower, got dressed, and headed downstairs to make myself some dinner. I took my meal down to the basement and turned on Netflix to start my binge-watch night of new shows. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have dozed off not long after eating. When I woke up, it was dark outside, and the only light was from the dim TV screen. The basement was freezing. I could feel the cold breeze from the open window. I got up, walked to the light switch at the bottom of the stairs, closed the window, turned off the TV, grabbed my dishes and headed upstairs. When I got upstairs, all the lights were off, indicating that my folks were still out. I cleaned the dishes, put them in the dishwasher and closed the kitchen window. Just before heading to my room, I remembered the living room windows were still open. I walked over to close the one by the TV and then the one by the front porch. I noticed Mom's vase with fake flowers had been knocked off the table, and the flowers were scattered across the floor. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe a strong breeze had knocked it over. I closed the window and started picking up the flowers. As I was cleaning, I heard a faint squeaky sound like a door handle being twisted. I listened closely, and after the handle squeak, I heard the creak of the hallway floor upstairs. A wave of fear shot through me and I froze. What seemed like an eternity passed as I stood there, bent over with one hand holding the vase and the other clutching the flowers. I slowly stood up and looked out the front window, hoping to see my parents' car. But the driveway was empty. My heart sank. I quickly but quietly put the vase and flowers down and walked silently to the bottom of the stairs. As I got closer, I heard 2 more creaks on the floor, causing me to stop dead in my tracks. I waited and listened, but there was nothing. I was only a few steps from the stairs. I took those last few steps and put one hand on the railing. I peeked around the corner and saw nothing but darkness. I didn't know what to do. Should I turn on the lights and let the intruder know I was coming? Should I leave and go to a friend VDJTM's house? Should I call my parents? Should I just go upstairs and confront whatever it was? I decided to put my phone on silent and go to the kitchen to text my dad, staying close to the back door for a quick escape. He said it was an old house and it was just settling after a hot day. I told him about the sound of the door handle twisting. He suggested there might be an open window upstairs and the wind was making the door move. Could that be it? Just an open window? A lot of my anxiety faded after talking to my dad, so I grabbed a glass of water and headed upstairs. I turned on the stairway lights and walked up slowly, still feeling a bit uneasy. At the top of the stairs, I saw all the doors were open except for mine. My parents' room and the spare bedroom were on the left, while the den and my room were on the right, with the bathroom at the end of the hallway. As Dad had predicted, my door was cracked open just enough for the breeze to move it. It was common for Mom to open all the doors and windows upstairs on hot days. I exhaled a sigh of relief, now confident Dad was right. I turned on my room light, did a quick check, and set my water on the nightstand beside my laptop. Then I went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. As I lay in bed trying to get sleepy, I was watching reruns of Seinfeld on my laptop. Suddenly, I heard a scraping sound coming from my closet door. I quickly turned on the light beside my bed. The closet door was cracked open slightly. Questions raced through my mind. Had it been open the whole time? Was it closed when I came in? I was sure it was closed when I entered. Before I could rationalize my thoughts, I heard a disturbing, sinister laugh. No horror movie could replicate the sound I just heard. As soon as I slid the laptop off my legs, the closet door burst open, and someone was standing there. My clothes partially covered their body and face. I looked closer and saw the most sickly, pale, and dirty woman I had ever seen. For that split second, Her image was burned into my mind. She had no shoes, her feet dirty and stained. Her skin was ghostly white, with cuts and dried blood from her face down to her arms and legs. She wore what looked like a once white nightgown, now a mess of dirt and blood. Her face, gray and sunken, looked like a decaying skeleton, partially hidden by my clothes. She asked in a raspy voice, "Have you seen my baby?" That was enough for me to grab my phone and run. Halfway out of my room, I heard her shriek, "Give me back my baby!" followed by hangers thrashing. I ran to the upstairs bathroom and locked the door. A second later, there was a huge thud against the door, and the woman screaming in a demonic tone, demanding her baby. I called 911, and the operator assured me the police would arrive quickly. I jammed my feet against the door and held my back against the sink, trying to keep the door closed. The woman didn't relent. Her screams turned into low, demon-like grunts, and the banging became heavy blows. After what felt like forever, I heard the police announce they were entering. I yelled that I was upstairs. Next, I heard a commotion of officers yelling and the woman growling. They ended up pepper spraying her, and it took 3 officers to subdue her. She kept yelling in a possessed-like state the entire time. I didn't leave the bathroom until the cops assured me she was out of the house. They told me she was likely on drugs or an escaped mental patient from a nearby county. I tried to tell them she sounded possessed, but they dismissed it as needing medication. My parents arrived home shortly after I gave my statement to the police. We moved out of that house a month later. That was one night home alone that I will never forget. History 2. I was working as a security guard at a remote weed farm in Colorado. The farm was way off the beaten path, making it a prime target for thieves and a challenging post for a lone security guard like me. This place had been used to grow beans in the early 1900s before some ambitious folks bought it to start a cannabis business. The farm was surrounded by dense woods on all sides. Entering the complex, you would see several old farmhouses. Only one was used for offices, while the others were just storage. This area was called the admin zone and was on the north end of the property. To the east, west, and south, there were 3 growing fields, each about 100 acres. Just past the admin area, there were 7 greenhouses enclosed by a fence and a large garage attached to it, used to store greenhouse supplies. Across the lot, there was another garage for farming equipment. It was a vast area for one security guard to patrol. This was a new contract, so I had no one to show me around. I had to create the security procedures from scratch, working 7 days a week, from 4 p.m. to 6 a.m., until everything was set. On my first day, I did a walkthrough with my boss and the farm owner, then I was left on my own. Thankfully, I had a decent little office in the admin building and an 8-channel security system set up. Weeks went by, and nothing unusual happened. It was peaceful, if anything. I figured out a good security routine and made a policy for new guards to follow. Life became easy. I would do my checks, read fan fiction, watch YouTube, glance at the cameras, and repeat. One night around 2 a.m., I saw a black mass jump over the greenhouse fence on the security feed. I bolted up, locked my office, and ran down there with my weapon drawn. It might seem dramatic, but I should have been the only person for miles around. The main road was gated and right next to my office, so I would have seen or heard someone approaching by vehicle. Foot traffic at that hour was unlikely. I got to the greenhouse area gate and quietly let myself in. I checked the greenhouses one by one but found nothing. I reviewed the footage, but the fence was 8 feet tall with an additional foot of barbed wire. The only thing that could clear that jump was a mountain lion. I hustled back to my office, but my monitor was black with a no signal message. The hard drive in the DVR was fried. It was weird, but not necessarily paranormal. A few days later, we replaced the hard drive and everything was fine. Around midnight, I was doing my checks by the backside of the greenhouse area when I heard a blood-curdling scream. My body went cold. It could have been the big cat I suspected earlier. I found the nearest gate and let myself into the greenhouse area, safer in there than out in the open. But then I heard crying, unmistakably female, diaphragm-shaking sobs. That wasn't a cat. I almost wished it was. I had to check, it was my job. Behind the greenhouse area, there was a dirt road circling the center field, connecting to the perimeter roads of the two side fields. Think of 3 big circles arranged in a loose triangle with the greenhouses in the middle. The crying sounded like it was coming from that center road. I approached slowly, the crying getting louder and louder, until it suddenly stopped. People don't just stop sobbing, there's at least some sniffling. It went from wailing to nothing in one beat. After that, I always felt uneasy toward that back field. I heard the scream several more times, always around midnight, but I never investigated further. By this time, the harvest had come and gone, and the fields were bare. I was still needed because they used the greenhouses throughout the winter. My responsibilities shifted from patrolling the fields to focusing on the greenhouses, ensuring the heaters worked through the cold nights. I started parking my Jeep next to the greenhouse area to avoid the long trek through the snow from the security office. I could see everything from my driver's seat, and my Jeep's heater was better than the space heater in my office. I had a routine: start the Jeep, get it nice and hot, then turn it off, keeping my windows cracked to listen for anything unusual. One night I heard a loud bang that snapped me out of any drowsiness. Something hit my vehicle. I didn't get out immediately. I looked around, checked my mirrors, but saw nothing. Then it happened again, a bang on the roof, and dirt tumbled down my windshield. Someone was throwing dirt clumps at me. I called my supervisor and she said she was on her way, about half an hour away. I grabbed my spotlight, a powerful one, and climbed onto the roof of my Jeep. The sound had to have come from the back field. I panned the light back and forth but saw nothing. I started with verbal commands announcing myself but got no response. I stayed on alert until my supervisor arrived. We walked the perimeter of all 3 fields and found nothing. By then it was almost 3 a.m. We talked and smoked by my Jeep when we heard a whistle, like a playful 2-tone whistle. My supervisor just looked at me, exasperated. I told her that was the kind of thing I dealt with there. She stayed for the rest of the shift, but nothing else happened. Things stayed quiet until Christmas Day when I picked up a shift for the holiday pay. I opted to stay in the office for warmth. That's when the music started, classical music you might hear at a fancy party. I listened, then stood up and listened more. I walked to the doorway of the security office and stopped to listen again. The music was still there. I stepped out, and it stopped. I paused in the dead silence. I stepped back in, and the music started again. It was almost cartoonish. This went on for quite a while and gradually faded away. There was nothing in that old building that could play music, no radio, no PA system. It wasn't my phone. I had tried to record it but picked up nothing but white noise. I walked outside thinking it might be coming from miles away but heard nothing. After that, I got permission to bring my husky to work. He loved the farm, especially in the snow, but some nights he wouldn't leave my side, growling at things I couldn't see. The strangest thing about that place was the atmosphere. Some nights you could just tell it was going to be unusual. Many other things happened there, but those were the most notable. If folks are interested, I might share a few more stories from my time in the Marines or as a cop. Thanks for listening. History 3. I've only shared this story with a few people and posted it once in a group, but I'm not sure if it's a glitch, paranormal, or just unexplained. Here it is. I've always dreamt very vividly, and sometimes small things I dreamt about would happen months or years later, but nothing as big as this. I had this recurring dream from when I was about 6 until my mid-20s. I'm 38 now, by the way. In the dream, I saw myself as a little girl on a carousel, waving to myself and feeling so happy. I was wearing a romper, which was popular attire for little girls in the 80s, and a pair of sandals. I always wondered why I had this dream, thinking maybe something traumatic happened and my brain was trying to remember it. But it turned out to be quite the opposite. Fast forward to 2018, I was at a fair with my family. My boyfriend took our daughter, who was 2.5, on the carousel while I waited, taking pictures. I was so giddy and happy. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I looked through the pictures later, I saw that it was the dream I had on and off for years. It wasn't me I was seeing in my dreams, it was my future daughter. She was wearing the same outfit and shoes, and I had the same overwhelmingly happy feeling for just a regular day at the fair. Everything was just the same. I cried just thinking about it. Some people don't believe me, but I don't care. It's a magical thing that I experienced. I pull up the photo of her from that day from time to time, and I'm still in complete shock over it to this day. What a wild and cool thing to experience. I'm thankful for places like this where I can share my experience with others openly. Thanks, Reddit. History 4. I'm a singer, so late nights are common for me. One night, I was driving myself and 4 bandmates home from a show. It was about a 2-hour drive, and we were jamming out to the radio and talking. Everything was fine until we got to a road that crossed a big lake in our state. As soon as I hit that bridge, I felt uneasy. I didn't want to seem like a wimp, so I didn't say anything to the others until I saw a guy walking on the shoulder of the bridge, which was practically non-existent. I swerved a little to miss him, and the guys started asking if I was okay and why I swerved. When I said it was to avoid hitting the guy, everyone said, "What guy?" I described him: a dark jacket, camo cargo pants, dark shoes, and wet hair. No one else saw him, and they laughed it off. But I saw him again just a few feet ahead and pointed him out. Still, no one saw him. I was freaking out because he was there, plain as day to me. A few miles ahead, I saw him again. This time, my drummer saw him too and said I was kidding. He described the guy's face because he turned this time, exactly how I saw him. I started driving faster, but he kept showing up every few miles, turning his head and grinning with this scary, creepy grin. I almost started crying. Once we got to the woods past the bridge, I thought we'd be fine, but he kept appearing until we got close to town. Then he was gone. I've never seen him again. That was one of the scariest ghost encounters I've had. His hair and clothes were wet, so I'm guessing it was the spirit of someone who drowned in the lake, sticking around to mess with people. But he scared me pretty bad. History 5. Hello everyone. I recently moved into an apartment with my girlfriend. We instantly fell in love with the place and the price. We got approved and moved in pretty quickly. The apartment is in a college town area with a bar nearby, grocery stores, and fast food places. Nothing out of the ordinary or sketchy. On the day we moved in, our landlord gave us our keys and briefed us on the neighbors. There are only 4 apartments in the complex. The landlord said the neighbors are very reserved for the most part. One neighbor is very scared of COVID-19, so they stay inside. The neighbor across from us seems very reserved as well. Now, I saved the best for last. VDJ, our bottom floor neighbor, Cal. As we were walking up to our place, our landlord said, "Oh yeah, that's Cal. He's very weird." My girlfriend and I looked at each other like, what does that mean? Cal's windows and doors were wide open. The landlord explained that he didn't have AC at the moment. We ignored it and continued unpacking. We had prior plans to leave town, so we didn't spend the first few nights there. Upon our return, we discovered why he was considered weird. When we first saw him, we said hello and made some comment about the weather. He seemed confused and disoriented and said, yeah, okay. As the days passed, we would say hi, and he would reciprocate at times. It was obvious that he was socially awkward. If I pulled into our parking lot and he saw me, he would scurry into his room. I thought it was unusual, but brushed it off. We thought that was the extent of his weirdness. Boy, were we wrong. Slamming, shoving, and hitting of his own doors started at night, only at night. The noise was so loud that it woke us up. When we got closer to our door, we heard him yelling. We finally understood why he was deemed weird. This continued for many nights in a row. We would notice that he just stood in the middle of the parking lot and talked to himself. If he saw me, he would go back inside. Things escalated this past weekend. It was late in the evening. We were chilling watching TV when we heard a knock. We immediately knew who it was since Cal was chilling outside with the neighbors. My girlfriend answered the door and Cal asked if we had seen a nice young Asian woman walking around. My girlfriend said no and he walked away. Last night I came back home from visiting my family. Immediately after I came home, Cal went upstairs. My girlfriend answered the door and he asked if we'd seen his mom walking around. My girlfriend sternly said no and closed the door. To conclude, this morning at 6 a.m., we heard an extremely loud knock. I awoke immediately, went to the door and did not see anyone, though I saw a flashlight. I got really scared and woke my girlfriend up. We looked out and saw a police officer looking for Cal. From what we could make out, Cal called the police due to hearing a gunshot and a young woman VJTMM scream. My girlfriend was up since 5 a.m., and she states that she did not hear any of that. At this point, we're on edge with this guy. If he comes upstairs again, we're going to tell him to ask the other neighbors. For a quick update, right as I finished typing this, the previous tenant texted me. He stated that Cal was really weird while they lived there as well. Cal would talk to himself. The previous tenant said he caught security camera footage of Cal going up the stairs near the door and starting to work out. Cal noticed the camera and went back downstairs. My girlfriend is officially in I wish I would mode. I also forgot to mention yesterday before I left to visit my family, I heard someone say hello and shuffle around my front door. I can only imagine who it was. It creeped me out because it was right after my girlfriend left to golf. Also, my girlfriend told me that she heard Cal go up the stairs after the police left at 6 a.m. and heard him say hello, trying to get someone VJTM's attention. Our plan is to call the non-emergency police line if he continues to be erratic towards us. I really hope it doesn't get to that point. Yes, I know this man is mentally ill. However, it does not negate the fact that he purposely tries to talk to us in the late hours of the night. Compassion is shown, but boundaries will be set. We did end up calling the police because we heard him yell and scream for help. The police came out and said they already knew about him. It seems like he's harmless, but we're still going to keep our distance for our safety and his. History 6. This is the story of how 3 U.S. Marines, including myself, got scared out of our minds in just a few hours. I have a buddy named Jake who's really into the paranormal, just like me. It was October 2018, and we wanted to go ghost hunting or explore supposedly haunted places. After some research, we decided our drive limit was 4 hours. We came across a place called the Devil's Tramping Ground. The legend says that there VJTM's a circle in the woods where nothing grows, and the devil himself uses it as a portal to Earth. If you try to sleep there, you'll hear a soothing female voice that puts you to sleep, and you'll wake up in a different location. So what did we do? We packed tents, sleeping bags, chairs, and beer, of course. Jake and I planned our trip, and another buddy, Nick, decided to join us. We were all set to go on Friday after work. We left base around 4 p.m. but didn't hit the road until roughly 8 p.m. because we kept getting sidetracked at different stores. Now to the good part. We got off the highway close to midnight. The GPS led us down a dark, narrow road with no streetlights. We were looking for the clearing to the Devil's Tramping Ground, which we read had satanic symbols on the road. As we drove, we were chased by about 10 dogs, including a silent black dog that kept appearing in the woods and in front of us, as if trying to turn us around. We found the symbols, and the dogs hadn't followed us that far. We parked, got out with flashlights, and scoped out the area. It was extremely unsettling. We set up our tents in a circle with our chairs around the cooler. We told ghost stories and drank beer, trying to ignore the occasional twig snapping and the feeling of being watched, chalking it up to animals. Around 2 a.m., we all started hearing voices around us like we were about to be jumped. We knew whatever it wasn't human. The voices stopped, and at the same time the car lights turned on. We found all the car doors open. Unnerved, we slowly closed the doors and went back to drinking. By 2:30 a.m., we were all on edge. We weren't even drunk because of everything that had happened. Then we heard beautiful humming coming from every direction. We knew that was NVDA, TMT, a good sign. Without a word, we all got up, went to the car, and got out of there. We decided to visit Lydia's bridge nearby, where it said that Lydia walks the road at night. We didn't see anything, so we slept in a nearby Walmart parking lot in the car. The next morning, we went back to collect our things. History 7. My grandmother passed away last year. It wasn't the fact that she was dying that got to me. I sat with her for several nights holding her hand, and I was glad to be there for her. Once it became clear she wasn't going to make it, I knew it was just a matter of time. The last time I saw her, despite being made as comfortable as possible, she had a moment of clarity where she suddenly became afraid. It wasn't that she was scared of dying, which she had been welcoming for some time. Instead, she was worried about an offhand remark she had made to one of my cousins a week earlier. She was afraid it might have been taken the wrong way and caused him to be upset with her. After spending more of the last 3 years of her life in the hospital than out, it broke my heart that one of her final coherent thoughts was the fear that she might have made one of her grandchildren even mildly unhappy. If she hadn't been drugged beyond any chance of mobility, I think she would have gone into full hysterics. It took my aunt and a nurse several minutes to calm her down. The nurse was the real MVP, telling my grandmother how lucky she was to have such a large family visiting her over the last few weeks. She reminded her that we were all happy, healthy, and doing well in life, and that we all loved her. It was one of the most agonizingly beautiful moments of my life. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. I hope I can carry that memory with me forever, but it terrifies me that even hours from death, you can still carry so much fear inside you over something you regret, and suddenly realize you will never be able to fix it. If you're listening to this, you might be wondering what she had said that caused her so much worry. My cousin had brought his girlfriend with him to the hospital, and my grandmother asked him in front of her if he thought she was the one. She was worried she might have embarrassed him. History 8. I don't think all homeless folks are scary, bad-intentioned, or creepy, but my encounter with one particular homeless person was definitely creepy. This happened in 2019 when I was 25. At the time, I was living with my parents, my sister, and my partner as we were saving up to buy a house. My parents' house was in a relatively big city in California, which had a large homeless population. The house was on a street that dead-ended into a park, a common hangout spot for homeless people. We often saw homeless folks walking by, but they usually never caused any problems. Here's a bit of backstory you need to know. My sister has special needs. Despite being 19, she appeared both physically and mentally more like a 10-year-old. One particular day, my mom and I had taken our dogs to the vet. My partner was at work, and my dad was working in the backyard, leaving my sister alone in the house. When my mom and I returned from the vet, my sister opened the door and greeted us saying, "This is my friend Jenny." Behind her stood a woman who looked to be in her 20s. She had my sister's socks on and was eating food from our house. This was confusing because the woman could have been a friend of my sister VJ TM's from one of the special needs programs she attended. My sister also has a limited vocabulary to explain situations, so my mom says, "Oh, you know my daughter?" Jenny replies, "We're getting to know each other." My mom then asks, "How are you getting to know her?" Jenny answers, "Oh well, I just live on the corner." My mom says, "You live around the corner?" "No, I live on the corner. I needed a tampon, so your daughter let me in." At this point, my mom is speechless, which I've never seen before. I whisper to her, "Get her out." Jenny is pacing around grabbing more food from our kitchen, acting erratically like she's on drugs. I tell my mom again, "Get her out." My mom says, "I know, but what if she has a knife or a gun? I need to do it carefully." My mom follows Jenny into the kitchen and says, "I'm so sorry, but you need to leave because I need to run an errand." Jenny ignores the request. I look in the bathroom and see a pile of Jenny's things. Again, my mom tells her she needs to leave. Jenny agrees and goes into the bathroom, locking the door. She was in there for what felt like forever, but it was probably around 5 minutes. We were pretty certain she was doing drugs. Finally, Jenny gathers her stuff and leaves, taking the socks and snacks with her. I run to get my dad, and we all take a deep breath. From what we can gather from my sister, Jenny knocked on the door asking for a tampon, and my sister, trying to be helpful, let her in. Jenny then realized she was practically alone with what looked like a child, and took full advantage, stealing clothes and shoes from us. We had a serious talk with my sister, telling her she can never open the door for strangers. We spent the next few months worrying that Jenny would spread the word that our house was an easy target. History 9. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was home alone at around 13 years old. Mom was at work and my sister was at school while I, as usual, decided to skip. It was around 1 p.m. when I picked up the phone to call my mom. This was back when landline phones were more common, so it was one of those pick it up then dial kinds. If you've ever picked up a landline phone mid-conversation, you'd know you could join or at least listen in. We only had one phone in the house, and it was this one. The only TV that was on in the house was in my sister's and my room, and it wasn't loud enough to be heard downstairs where the phone was. This was weird. When I picked up the phone instead of a dial tone, I heard static. It wasn't loud static, just that white noise you hear when it's quiet on the other line. Then I heard the voice of a young English girl, which was odd because we lived in a small town in America and didn't know anyone from England. She said, "Can you put that down, please?" I got spooked and answered, "What? Hello?" She didn't seem to hear me, or if she did, she didn't want to answer. She just kept saying, "Please stop that, don't do that, put that down, please stop, please put that down, don't touch that," in a calm voice, almost melancholic at first, but getting more and more upset. I asked again, "Hello? Who are you?" Then I heard the sound of fabric rustling near the phone, like someone was shifting, and a grunt like a person would make when getting up. I freaked out and hung up the phone. I ran upstairs and didn't tell anyone until later that night when I told my mom. She lifted the phone herself and got a dial tone. She didn't believe me and was skeptical but clearly disturbed by how upset I was. I think about it every so often and feel a bit sick. I didn't know what to do at the time, I just freaked out and bailed. But I can't help but feel I eavesdropped on something horrible. The little girl sounded upset, and it seemed like there was someone with her. I don't know what I could have done, but I sure didn't do it. This was 11 years ago now, and I've since moved out of that house and live in my own apartment.